insane story of Visa Starfrost in Yu-Gi-Oh! Our story begins with a large explosion in an unknown galaxy. On a lone planet stands Visa Starfrost, an extremely powerful galactic entity who right now has lost all their memories. In an attempt to understand how this happened, they began traveling through the universe when they landed on the primitive planet Rhyphobia, where he was immediately confronted by their leader, whose name's Scareclaw Rykart, and something is strange about them, as the two appear to be one and the same, as Rykart is a split-off version of Starfrost's soul. And Starfrost hoped that by defeating Rykart, he could regain his memory. Before that could happen, Rykart would combine with his phobia-themed creatures to create Scareclaw Tryhard. And while that looks super intimidating, if there's one thing you need to know about Visas is that he's extremely powerful. So he defeated Tryhard in a single blow and absorbed him into his body. And now having regained a piece of his soul, Visas began to travel through the universe again in search for the other pieces. And as he traveled through the cosmos, something strange happened, as he was now joined by this little creature known as Scareclaw Lightheart, who is a chibi version of the Tryhard he just defeated, and the two are now friends. And their journeys would bring them to a new watery planet, where they would meet with the mermaid residents of the planet, who would tell them of their new tyrannical ruler who recently took over the planet, who was known as Tearlament's Rhinoheart, another missing piece of Starfrost's soul. And they also met Tearlament's Kitkalos, the guardian of the planet, who had been trying to protect them from Rhinoheart but was too weak. However, now that Starfrost was there, they stood a chance. However, right on cue, the group was attacked by Tearlament's Rhinoheart, who used his whip to attack the mermaids and absorb their power, and while Kitkalos tried to step in, it was not enough, as he absorbed their power and transformed into Tearlament's Kaleidoheart, who immediately engaged Starfrost in battle, but he should have been paying attention to something else, because seeing her people turned into this monster, Kitkalos would become enraged, powering up into Tearlament's Rulkalos and plunging her sword into Rhinoheart's back. And all seemed well as Starfrost began to absorb another piece of his soul into his body. But that's when out of nowhere, a giant cyborg warrior from the sky would clash down and attack Rulkalos. Before Starfrost could even react, the beast had put Rulkalos inside of a capsule and flew towards the sky, and through the portal it exited in, Starfrost saw another piece of his soul menacingly staring at him, the cached hero Rhyheart. And Starfrost would chase after, ending up on a planet he had actually been to before, as it would appear that this version of his soul was part of a highly advanced cybernetic army that had rapidly taken over the primitive planet that the Scareclaws lived on before. They'd even turned the three Scareclaw beasts into a horrifying cyber monster. And if you think it can't get worse, wait until you see what Rhyheart had in store for Rulkalos, because he used the chamber she was captured in to turn her into Tearlament's Kashtira. And this was enough to send Starfrost into a rage as he began dicing through the Rhyheart army, which caught the attention of Rhyheart, who descended from his giant spaceship in the sky, as we began for the craziest battle of our story yet, as Rhyheart was now fitted with an insane suit of armor now known as Kashtira, a Rhyheart. And to make things worse, it would appear that Starfrost isn't the only one capable of absorbing his other forms, as a Rhyheart would begin absorbing the Scareclaw Lightheart. And with now both of his only friends taken from him, Starfrost was pretty angry. So angry that in a singular punch, he was able to obliterate a Rhyheart who, just like the other pieces of his soul, he began absorbing into his body. However, after absorbing all the fear from his Scareclaw version and the anger from his Kashtira version, Starfrost would start to lose himself as his body broke apart from the overwhelming emotional power, transforming into an unholy monster known as Vicious Astrolabe. And I know our hero just became an evil monster, but now it's time to zoom out on our story and look at this planet system, because on the smallest golden planet lies Medanium Ruinheart. You see, this is actually the purest version of Starfrost that exists, and the person we've been following throughout this entire story is actually not the real Starfrost. And the real Starfrost, known as Ruinheart, lives on the New World, where he is the guardian of the World Tree, a tree that stores and protects timelines. In fact, you can even look at branches of the tree and see the parts of our different stories so far, like the Water Planet, the Scareclaw Planet, and even the highly advanced Kashtira Planet. And before the story could get explained anymore, Ruinheart would be attacked by giant volleys of green, red, and blue energy from the sky, as he was now face to face with a giant monster formerly known as Starfrost, who would claw at Ruinheart, knocking him back. That's when this guardian of the World Tree would enter his most powerful form, the Medanium Primeheart, who launched into the sky with an epic golden flying kick, who would hit the beast so hard it knocked Starfrost out of his enraged state. And now that all four parts of Starfrost's soul were finally present, they began converging, finally ascending into the true form of the World Tree Guardian. But that's when a rippling purple power unlike anything we've seen in the story so far would ascend on the New World. It would appear that our entire story so far has actually been being observed by another god of time, known as Vita Kalanta. And this guy's power must have been truly insane, because even up against the true form of Starfrost, they were pretty evenly matched. Or at least that was until Vita would power up into his more powerful form, where he was actually strong enough to defeat and slay Starfrost. However, time gods can never truly die, so instead of passing away, he was sent back through a time wormhole. And our story re-begins with a giant explosion across an unknown galaxy, as Visa Starfrost has now been reborn as Visa Samsara, who has lost his memory and appears to have a soul that's missing